Okay. What was your first experience with sacrifice?
As a child, well, I was from a only child, single parent household, and because of that, that meant there was limitations on money, on time, on connection. So, growing up, one of the hardest things was that my mum worked shift work. So that meant as a nurse, she was out of the house during the night time. And I had a nanny that would come, and the nanny would come maybe around 11 o'clock at night or something like that, which was technically when I was meant to be asleep. But I found it really difficult to fall asleep knowing that my mum was leaving and someone else was coming to take over, and that gave me a lot of anxiety. So I think the sacrifice that occurred, and that was safety and well-being and stability and comfort, those things were not in my everyday experience. So I had a great deal of anxiety around falling asleep and trusting that everything was going to be okay while I was sleeping, that there was an element of out of control, out of safety. So I really struggled with that, and I still to this day have a lot of anxiety about going to bed and about trusting that I can fall asleep. And I still find that really difficult. Because my mum was away at night time, that meant that she had to sleep during the day. So she would not wake up till later in the morning, which meant I had to entertain myself. So rather than having that connection and care and comfort and time, I had to get up and look after myself, which was I was quite lonely. I really, really wished that I had brothers and sisters, and had to try and fill that gap somehow. So I guess there was some creativity in that, some imagination in that. That's a good thing. Like, that was definitely a bonus that came out of sacrifice. But if I was to have chosen, I much would have rather had a busy, entertaining, healthy household with a lot going on and interactions. And I don't know, there's an emptiness, I think, that comes from being a child of a parent that had a lot of pulls and responsibilities outside of the family.
Do you feel like you had quite a few responsibilities as a child?
Yeah, to look after myself. Responsibilities to entertain myself, to be quiet, to not disrupt and disturb, to also handle my emotions. That was not comfortable, or it was inconvenient for me to be upset or sad or worried or anxious.
Self-regulating your emotions.
Definitely.
Sacrificing emotions.
Yeah, I definitely had to sacrifice how I truly felt, because I needed to maintain a certain amount of okayness for the world to keep rotating and working. I found that really challenging and really difficult. And there were definitely times that because you're trying to hold everything in and keep it together, there's only so long until the gates burst. So big emotions and big temper tantrums occasionally. And I remember that my mum's philosophy, which happened through her education through the church and social conditionings through the church, was spare the rod, spoil the child. So definitely getting a wooden spoon was a thing. Huge anxiety about hearing the rustling of knives and forks in the drawer and knowing what was coming. Yeah, that. So if I had big emotions, there was pain from exterior. Yeah, so there was not the comfort. And when I used to visit one relative in particular, she had a little bird in a cage that was a mechanical bird, and I would ask to play that mechanical bird, and it would tweet and do a little dance as like a kind of like a wind-up toy. So my sacrifice when I was around family members was to be quiet and not to ask questions and not to interact, not to have a voice, but to be quiet and polite. But I had a little bit of okayness that I used to have. Okay, now, even as a young child, space it out so people don't get angry with you. Arrive, be quiet for probably half an hour or so. And then when there's a gap in the conversation, ask for the mechanical bird. Then when there's another gap in the conversation later on, ask for a biscuit. When there's another gap in the conversation, ask to go outside. So those were the sort of things that I had to be quiet and polite. Then obviously through church, through the Bible story of Christ and how Christ died for our sins and made the ultimate sacrifice so that we could be saved and go to heaven. And I grew up loving the idea that Jesus loves and cares for us. There's unconditional love. So there's two unconditional love stories within my childhood. One was through God, the other was from my grandma. So that was kind of went hand in hand. So that was where the good bits came from.
Do you feel that sacrifice was quite normal?
Well, I saw women sacrificing all around me. Women sacrificed because they were doing everything. I had two female-male partnership relationships that I was witnessing. One was my grandparents and one was my auntie and uncle. And what I noticed is that they would work outside the home, and when they arrived they'd sit down and that was the end of their day. And I saw the woman running around, feeding, cooking, dishes, tidying up, looking after the children. They did everything in the house. There was barely a time where they sat down or had a rest. All got to participate really into the conversations and things happening. And I guess there was a lot of comfort in that because I was probably one of the people benefiting from their sacrifice. But now it's my turn and it's not so fun. From them got love through their sacrifice, and that came in the form of food, or usually we would go on picnics, and that was a big event. The whole family would go, and my grandma would spend all day cooking the day before. But my grandma really suffered from mental health issues. She was diagnosed as schizophrenic, and there were often times where things would become really overwhelming for her, and I didn't really get to see what that looked like for her except for through tired. She was tired, so she'd go and have a lie down. So periodically through the day or through her chores, she would have to lie down, and the way of regulating was to look at the birds in the trees. And she had her whole house built so that she could see the trees and the birds in the trees, and that's what helped her tremendously. That was her calming. And I guess it was a kind of meditation, really, and that was her way of getting through. My experience of sacrifice as a child was about women doing everything for the people around them, for their family, even to the point that grandma spent so much money on presents. Like, we were not a wealthy family, and every single person in the family got a big Christmas present. Yeah, it was that abundance of love, and yeah, I still think presents are a way of honouring people. It's for the greater good. That was what I learned, sacrifice, even to the point that there's nothing more important than Christmas Day to me as a family, to be together. And of course I wanted my grandma there for Christmas, but because she was a nurse, she'd have to go and do a shift first. Yeah, she had to go to work and look after sick people. And we understood that because sick people need care and love and attention, so yeah. In my teenage years, it was the 90s, and this was the era of girl power. I think Spice Girls and women can do everything posters, anything posters, not everything, anything posters. And I guess obviously you're a bit more rebellious as a teenager, so I was very much rebelling against what I felt like was a very restricted life, even to the point that where I wasn't interested in anything to do with faith and religion. Like, that was embarrassing and cheesy and naff and lame. I wanted to be dressing interesting, doing crazy things, taking risks. I guess the only sacrifices I was making at that time was around the commitments that I had to ballet. So there was definitely that. I did go through a phase where I was bullied for being overweight, and I think that I wasn't necessarily that overweight, but this person that was a friend knew that it was a trigger for me. So she was really awful to me. So I decided that I would show them, and I stopped eating. That was me sacrificing my health and well-being to prove a point and to show people that I was this or I was that.
Why did ballet appeal to you so much as a child and as a teenager?
I think I was kind of born with this thing inside that was, it's quite hard to describe. It's kind of like a wonder that you have in the world. I remember just watching like the fabric moving on the washing line, just like the movement of the wind and fabric. It's like a dance, and it's kind of like that, but like inside. So you have this internal thing inside. And I also loved music, and those two things together, it's the movement and the music, it's the response to the external situation or this external stimulation. I just loved it. It's just one of those things that's quite hard to describe. It's an internal feeling. So I always loved the idea of dancing.
What was ballet like for you? But more specifically, do you think it tended to lift you up or bring you down?
Well, it certainly brought me up at the beginning. I loved it. It just tapped into that creative side, and I just shone, sparkled, all of those things. But then there was a situation where my friend, who I also went to school with, who was like the person that brought me into that dance school, she was the star of that class, and she got a lesser mark than I did in our first exam, and I witnessed the shock, the disappointment, and I guess kind of the horror that she would get a lower grade than I did, and that was super awkward, and I was really uncomfortable with that and really anxious to make people happy. So I guess I internalized that as my fault, and so probably from that point I became more aware of how much I should show up as a dancer, and because I guess I wasn't seen as the traditional dancer, like my feet were not dancer feet, my body was not a dancer body. And I guess in my small experience of that was not necessarily around bone structure and I guess how my feet showed a curve or didn't show a curve. It was more around, oh well, that must mean that I'm too big or I'm too this. So I thought, oh, so okay, you're not actually a dancer, you're just here for fun. Okay, so just be here for fun, and don't be better than the other person. So ballet started becoming less and less fun, but I learned a lot about discipline, the importance of they'd say things like, no one else is going to pull up for you. You have to pull up for yourself. No one else is going to suck in your guts and pull in your tail, tuck under your tail. You have to do that.
What do you think ballet has left you with as a residual? Could be physical, could be emotional.
Oh, I am so sad that I don't dance anymore. Like, nothing makes me happier than dancing, and I haven't danced properly since I left dancing, which was when I was 18 years old, which is 30-ish years ago. And now I feel too embarrassed to. And I really, like, even when I've been to classes, like move classes that has a little bit of dance in it, then I feel myself and I go, this is what life is about. Like, movement makes me happy. It moves the emotions that are stuck. It frees up my soul and my spirit. And why do I not do that anymore? I don't know. There is definitely a dancer in me.
Oh, I love you. Okay.
Rah.
Rah.
But at the end of the day, the biggest thing was there's not enough time to do everything. And I felt like as an adult, my job was to make money and not necessarily do things like dancing, because that's like a kid thing to do, you know. And I didn't have a dancer's body, so that's not my pathway. So I internalized the idea that dancing wasn't for me and that art was going to be something that I could do. And I really liked the idea of making a difference in the world. I idealized the idea of being an artist and thought that pathway could be something that would be fulfilling in that way. So I sacrificed what I really loved, which was dancing, for something that I believed in or believed I could do, which is quite sad looking back on it, because I feel like I spent all of my time at art school trying to prove myself and trying to prove that I could do things. And it wasn't actually about being creative or expressive, or there was no real enjoyment. It was just like one slog after another slog, and it wasn't actually that fun or life building.
What is your definition of what makes a mother? Good or bad?
It's a hard one to answer, because my automatic answer would be someone that loves, cares for, sacrifices, and physically, emotionally, spiritually for their children. But what we have to remember is that mothers are women, mothers are people that are trying their best. And it's really important to do no harm, but we're all human and we all have our own wounds that we're trying to navigate while we're mothering, and we're learning as we go. Yeah, and I think society puts a lot of pressure on what it looks like to be a mother. Yeah, there's different pressures on a mother role than there is on a father role. It's something that I struggle with and go back and forth with, and I don't necessarily have all the answers of what a good mother is, but thinking about the mothers around me that I've even have friends and family and people that have mothered me. I think it's about looking after people and thinking of their needs. My impression of what a mother is now is different from what a mother is or what a mother should be when I was starting out to be a mother. I think my job when I started being a mother in my head was about making sure that you were healthy, that you were sleeping, that your physical needs were being met, and that meant sacrificing sleep, well-being, career, friends. My friends were all being young and going out and trying to find partners and things like that. And for me, I was just trying to keep you alive and making sure the people around you were okay people. Now, and through that process of you growing up, I realised through your different life stages, the most important thing was that I was looking after myself, because you probably learnt the most about how to navigate your world through watching me navigate my world. And actually, I kind of missed that memo because I spent a lot of time trying to make things okay for you. It wasn't easy financially. It wasn't easy as a solo parent because I had to do a lot of working outside of the home and weekends working rather than us going and doing fun things. We had some cool adventures, don't get me wrong, but there was a lot of times you had to worry about money when you shouldn't have had to have, that you were watching me worry, which you shouldn't have had to have. That probably meant that you had a lot of burdens that you were carrying, which wasn't something I was aware of or certainly didn't anticipate and wish that I could shelter you from. So I spent most of my time trying to build you up and make sure you had good self-esteem. That was the thing that I wanted. I think each mother tries to heal a wound in themselves through being a better parent than they had. And that was something that I wanted to make sure that you had good self-esteem. But I should have done that through looking after myself better.
Do you think that sacrifice makes a mum good or makes them bad?
I mean, I always thought it was a good thing. I thought mothers that sacrifice to their children is like a hero that's like next to godliness. You sacrifice. You give the kid the nice, crusty, delicious edge of the cake with the yummy bits, and you have the bit that's not so good, or you give them the biggest bit of the lasagna, or you give them the sweetest strawberry, the reddest strawberry, or the first strawberry, and you don't have that one, you give them that, because you get joy from them having joy. That's a part of the benefits of being a mum, seeing your kids happy and experience the wonder of the world. But I definitely don't think that anymore, because now I realise the importance of looking after yourself. It's that whole idea of you put the oxygen mask on yourself so that you can then better look after others. And I always thought that was just a saying, that was not really, it was just whatever, because I'm over here being the martyr, because I'm like the best mum, because I do everything for my kid, and I want to be with my kid all the time because they're the coolest kid, and obviously I'm a great mum because my kid is awesome, because obviously I've sacrificed everything to make sure that they are well-rounded, socially competent people that look and care for others. Yeah, I guess just recently I'm questioning that around what's the appropriate amount of sacrifice for a parent. I'm not sure. I thought it was everything, but now it's kind of counterproductive.
How do you care for yourself as a mother, as a person?
Badly, really badly. I just think about all the times I came home from work absolutely exhausted and unable to parent because I was so shattered, because I was so busy trying to be the best teacher and look after my students and do a good job at my job, so that I don't know why I did work so hard. But I didn't have that good role modelling of what self-care looked like, because in my experience that just wasn't a thing. You look after other people, don't look after yourself. That was what was being modelled around me. I also think it's tied in with being a solo parent, because you've one person running a household, and households really need at least two people running them. There's so many jobs that need to be done, and if I wasn't working, I was mowing the lawns or figuring out the budget or buying shoes, figuring out how to buy shoes, or there were some real big hard things to deal with. And self-care is just not as important as making sure that the mortgage is paid. So that's what I prioritise. This is not just a me thing. This is an everyone thing. Everyone in my friend circle struggles with self-care and the pressures they have.
What do you keep and what do you give up becoming a parent?
There's a lot that I gave up. I was the first to have kids in my friend group, and I was 24 when I was pregnant, 25 when you were born. My friends were all having fun, doing young people things, travelling, all of that stuff. And one of my friends was really into going out, taking drugs. I actually used to live with her. She lived in the same house as us when you're around 1, and I realised that she was taking drugs and she was in the house. I don't know how that played out exactly, but I just knew that it was becoming less and less safe. She was my best friend, but I knew that was not healthy, and I didn't want you to have to deal with that. And I knew I did not want you to grow up in that town. I loved our house. Our house was so beautiful. It was so, our house was such a big part of who I was as a person. It was my tūranga waiwai. It was, my roots were rooted in that house and that place, but I knew growing up in that town was not, you were going to end up with values or around people with values that didn't line up with my values. I knew that we had to leave, so we had to sell the house, which was probably one of the hardest things that I had to deal with. It was heart-wrenching. It's heart-wrenching for my mum too. The day that we closed that door for the last time was so hard. It was so sad. And then, I really loved that house. And I loved you having your own house and being able to have a room that belonged to us. But that wasn't the life that I wanted for you. I wanted you to think big, think outside the box, to not have that small town mentality. And Wellington was going to be a much healthier place for you to live. So moving to Wellington was huge. It was really, really good. I'm so glad we did. But it wasn't without a massive sacrifice.